Okay, hi everyone. This is Luned, and this is the very first episode of Luned and Alan Talk About This Week in Sports.
And this is Alan, and I will see what I can add to Luned's opening monologue.
That's the ESPN music. What's going to happen is I'm going to tell everything you need to know about this week in sports, and then Alan is going to tell you about what the actual facts are, because it may be infuriating for you to hear some facts that might not be true or some facts that might be true about sports.
So I'll be reacting live and add whatever I think I know on top of what Luned thinks she knows.
This week, we're going to start with basketball. Basketballs. This is a very important week in basketball. I'll tell you why. It's because this is the playoffs week, and this is the 8th year that not Detroit, but Cleveland Cavaliers are playing the Golden State Warriors. They're from California.
So this is one of many playoff weeks, and this is the 4th consecutive year that Cleveland is playing Golden State Warriors.
The Golden State Warriors, they're great because they have Steph Curry. He is super beautiful, like a ballerina.
That is true.
They have Klay Thompson, I'm pretty sure, still. And they've been doing really well, and they've beaten the Cavs twice already. And on Wednesday they're going to play again, and don't worry because Andrew Iguodala, maybe just Iguodala we'll stick with, he had his
Andre,
knee
for those keeping score at home,
his ankle or parts of his leg were really hurting, but they're not hurting anymore. He has no pain for 3 days, so he probably is going to play on Wednesday, which gives the Golden State Warriors even more power. But you don't have to worry also, because if you're a Cavs fan, because sometimes in the past the Cavs have been down 3 games, and LeBron James, he's the best Cavs player. He has been like, no way. He's just so mad, and when he's so mad, then he could still come back even if they were 3 games down. And I think that's what happened last year, that the Cavs came back and won the entire playoffs, even though the Golden State Warriors were up a lot. So even if the Golden State Warriors won the first 3 games, that doesn't mean anything, because the playoffs happen in games best of 7. And this is the 4th year that they played each other. It's even maybe the 8th year that they played each other. No, that doesn't sound right. Maybe it's the 4th year they played each other.
Stick with where you were.
This is like a dynasty. And and also I know about LeBron James that
you call it a rivalry, maybe.
More hours of basketball, not only than most people, but also more hours of basketball in the playoffs than are hours in an entire season of basketball, because he's been playing so many playoff seasons. He's really good. All right, on to the next sport.
So I think mostly Luned got that totally correct. LeBron does get very mad, and occasionally that allows him to come back from deficits that you can hardly imagine. I think she's referencing the fact that 2 years ago Cleveland was down 3-1 and managed to win the best of 7 series against these self-same Golden State Warriors, but it's hard to say for sure. I also think that Luned is actually correct that LeBron James has played an entire extra season in just playoff minutes. And also, she's certainly correct that LeBron has played many more minutes than your average person. But mostly, I would say, I would give her a solid B+, A- on the entire understanding there.
Okay, next sport, and Luned and Alan's This Week in Sports. I'm doing this while I'm driving.
Don't do this at home. This should not be done while driving.
Next sport is hockey. Hockey is also in the playoffs for the Stanley Cup.
Nailed it.
Feel like there are lots of games to the Stanley Cup. It often happens in the spring or summer, even though you normally think of basketball happening, of hockey happening in the winter. It is a situation where Canada and the
Are your
US
hands on the wheel at all?
are playing together because they're the best at hockeys. And I would say Washington played last night, and I think a team was called the Tigers.
Well, Washington did play. There were no teams called the Tigers per se, but I guess you can look at hockey as like U.S. versus the Canadians, but in this case, they're both sort of U.S. based teams.
And they scored more goals than normal, maybe like 4. Hockey is a very fast-paced game. They play a lot of games. I think that's all I got on hockey.
Just for those keeping track at home, it is the Washington Capitals against the Las Vegas Knights, which even for the people who follow hockey closely may be surprising because the Las Vegas Knights are an expansion team and they've been around for exactly 1 year. So if you've never heard of the Las Vegas Knights, you are not alone, and that should not make you feel bad.
All right, next sport, soccer times. In soccer, we're having the World Cup start soon. It hasn't started yet, but that doesn't mean that we can't think a lot about it. One thing that we think about is in Russia. One thing we're thinking about is that these two teams, the USA, that's where we're from, and Ireland didn't make it, although worldwide people are feeling like they are deserving of it. So even though we wish that the US could play in the World Cup, they just aren't that good enough, and they haven't been for a long time.
Well, they haven't been during this particular qualifying cycle. I would say that they were good enough to play in the World Cup, last World Cup, because they did.
I feel like the women's soccer team's really strong, or at least they were in the late 90s. I haven't heard about them since Mia Hamm times. But they're probably playing a World Cup too. I don't know if it's in Russia. But as soon as the World Cup gets started, we want to really keep our eyes on Venezuela, that has Messi, and Argentina, which I now feel like has Messi,
yes,
and Great Britain, because they have lots of the guys from the Tottenham Spurs, who we like. That's Alan and me's home team. A lot of people think that Arsenal is better, but that doesn't matter in the case of the World Cup. In the case of the World Cup, every country just brings their own, so they can have players from all the teams.
I think most of what Lyndon said there was correct, but probably won't help you at all. Arsenal and Tottenham are English Premier League teams, both of which are made up of people from all over the country and all over the world. But the World Cup, which will be starting in not very long from now, you have to play for a team where you can claim nationality in some way. So I'm not exactly sure what the Tottenham Arsenal thing was about. Messi definitely does play for Argentina, though. That's for sure.
The World Cup is a round-robin situation. Everybody plays each other in a round, and you add up the scores. And so if you get 0-0 every single game that you play, then your whole score is 0 and you don't win the World Cup. But if you get 3 goals and one team gets 1, that matters. But that doesn't seem like it could be the system, because that doesn't seem like a good system, because then everyone would just play no defense.
None of that was true.
Maybe it's like an arms race kind of thing. All right, that's this week in soccer.
So just a couple quick clarification points. The World Cup does have a part where teams are put into groups. In those groups, how many goals they score actually is not the deciding factor most of the time. If you win a game, you get 3 points. If you draw a game, you get 1 point, and if you lose a game, you get 0 points. And then the top 2 point scorers of each of those groups move on to the knockout phase. In the knockout phase, then all that matters is whether you win or lose, and it's 1v1 and single elimination. The only other thing I would add to that is that it is very disappointing that the U.S. is not in this World Cup. I completely agree with Luned on that one. Also, we're not from England, so we can't claim Tottenham as a home team.
This week in baseball. Baseball's been started for a little while. It's spring. March was spring training. Teams are just starting the marathon of playing baseball like every day for the whole summer. We're from New York. The Red Sox don't matter in New York, but they were just on tour. They had a 4-3 tour. Now they're back home. The Yankees and the Mets have been playing, but I don't know how they're doing. And Alan's team is Baltimore Orioles. Again, have heard nothing about them. Maybe it's so early in baseball that no one cares yet. I bet there's some things that people are talking about trades, but I don't know about that. So that's this week in baseball.
Well, I guess that was this week in baseball. I think by a tour, Luned means that the Red Sox were not playing home games, but were in fact on the road. I don't actually know what their record was on the road, but we'll go with 4-3. That sounds perfectly good to me. The Yankees and the Mets, which are both in fact New York teams, as she identified, are both doing. The Yankees are doing quite well. The Mets are doing okay, and my Orioles are the worst team in Major League Baseball. I think that that's the trade thing she was talking about, because now that they're the worst team in baseball, they're thinking about trading their star shortstop Manny Machado, or it could have just been she likes the word trades, and I'm not totally sure on that one.
Okay, last segment of sports this week with Anne and Luned. Football. American football. They're not playing even right now, but that doesn't mean that they're not in the news this week. President Trump wanted the Philadelphia Eagles, who won the Super Bowl, I think, like 3 months ago, to come to the White House, but they don't want to because they've been kneeling during the national anthem, and President Trump has been saying that that's bad and doesn't support the troops and doesn't honor the veterans and the guys in the NFL. And the Eagles are like, yeah, it does. It just also represents our point of view. And so they're like, I don't want to come to the White House. So President Trump, like normal, was like, actually, I didn't want you to come anyway. And last in NFL news is it's time for tradings and sellings of people for way too much money.
Again, very little argument with the basic premise of this. It is true that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. It is also true that Trump disinvited them from the White House. One weird wrinkle of that current story is that actually there were no players on the Eagles who were actually kneeling. And on Fox News you will see lots and lots of pictures of Eagles kneeling, but that has nothing to do with, they weren't actually protesting in that way. The Eagles' protests was a raised fist during the national anthem. But don't worry, that's way too nuanced for anybody in the political commentary space. The basic idea here that the Eagles, my favorite football team, continue to be politically and socially on the good side flies in the face of the fact that football continues to be, as Luned said, people being bought and sold for far, far too much money.
Sports This Week with Luned and Alan signing off.
And I still don't know what that music is.